I used to think silence was a kind of peace. In offices, it wears a badge and carries a lanyard. On Monday at 6:42 a.m., I unlocked the glass door to the 17th floor and felt the air bite like an unkind remark. The motion lights blinked awake in squares, one by one, like cautious animals. My desk waited under the vent, as it had for 9 years, a neat corner that smelled faintly of paper and old coffee. Next to the monitor, the pothos I had rescued from the break room, 2 leaves, one almost translucent, sagged toward its white ceramic pot. A brown vein had spread along one edge overnight, like a quiet rumor that got a little braver. "Good morning," I told it, "because you talk to the things that don't talk back. They never weaponize your words. My name is Grace Santos. I'm 51, and I've been in HR logistics for almost 2 decades. I've learned that in offices, the quiet ones don't vanish. They just notice everything first." At 6:49, my inbox had already stacked itself into a small city. 11 unread messages, 4 calendar invites, 2 gentle reminders, with the subject line whispered in italics, per my last email. HR forms, training deadlines, a new values in action poster to be printed in A3 and mounted in the halls by Friday. On the poster, a smiling woman held a paper cup with the caption, "Respect is our default." I watered the plant, 20 milliliters, measured into the lid of a bottle because precision is easier than hope, and opened the deck I'd built over the weekend. Quarterly logistics performance and workforce attrition. 72 slides, each with a small GS watermark in the bottom right corner. When you have to prove you exist, you sign even your silence. By 8:03, the floor hummed with footsteps and diplomatic laughter. Someone dropped a stapler. Someone practiced a laugh with too many teeth. The elevator dinged like a spoon against glass. "Grace," said a voice, crisp as a pressed shirt. Amber, 32, whose hair was always perfect, and whose confidence arrived before she did. She hovered at the edge of my cubicle with a coffee she wouldn't drink. "Quick thing, don't worry about the 9 o'clock. It's just a small internal." "The performance review?" I kept my voice even, measured like the water in the plant's lid. "Just alignment," she said, "a word that means some people were invited and some were not, and we will never call it what it is. Nothing you need to stress over. Dan will run the slides." "My slides," I said. It wasn't a question. The watermark at the bottom right glowed a little in my head, like a talisman the size of a comma. Amber smiled with the bright mercy of a dentist. "You know how it is. We don't want too many voices in the room." I nodded, because there are times when nodding is safer than speaking, when you are a woman past 50 in an industry that worships speed, noise, and certainty. Silence filed past us in a hallway of sensible shoes. My plant stood very still and watched. At 9:06, I stood behind the glass wall of Conference B, where the blinds were always half closed like a suspicious eye. Through the slats, I could see my deck projected, the shape of my work stapled to the wall by a beam of light. Dan clicked to slide 14. Attrition by tenure, 0-12, 13 to 24, 25 to 36 months. The numbers moved through the room like weather. I knew where each one had been born. A spreadsheet at 12:17 a.m., a pivot table at 7:05 p.m., a line I had redrawn 3 times until it curved like the truth. "So what we're seeing," Dan said, "is an uptick in voluntary exits between months 19 and 23, particularly in the Southeast region." His finger traced where mine would have. Someone asked a question I couldn't hear. Dan answered with a script I had written without writing it down. You can be erased in 100 ways. Sometimes it is a missing name on a slide. Sometimes it is a chair you aren't offered. Sometimes it is a glass wall that reflects your face back at you, asking you to recognize yourself without a label. At 9:59, the room opened and people spilled out in polite clumps. Amber didn't look at me. Dan did, briefly, the way you look at the sun when you know you shouldn't. "How'd it go?" I asked, because I wanted to hear what honesty sounded like in his mouth. "Good," he said. "Clean." He rubbed the back of his neck. "We might need you to send the raw tables to finance." "You have them?" I said. He blinked. Right. At 10:11, my calendar chimed, team lunch, celebration. A confetti emoji. Location. The new place 2 blocks down with the wall of living moss where everyone takes pictures and pretends to be a forest. The invite had gone to all staff. My name was not in the to field. A secret is only a secret if everyone already knows it. By noon, I microwaved my leftovers at the edge of the break room like a person trespassing in her own house. The plant sat by the window where I had moved it for light. A strand of vine fell against the glass, thin as a vein. Outside, the city glittered in the kind of sunshine that looks expensive from far away. "Thought you were at lunch," said Lucia from accounting, pausing at the water cooler. She wore flats with little gold buckles and kindness like a second skin. "Big crowd," I said. "Ah," she looked at the plant. "You're good with those." "Mostly, I'm patient with those." She smiled, but there was a wince behind it. "They'll come around." "Maybe," I said. "Maybe not." I had learned not to build altars to maybe. At 12:37, an email landed from HR required training, respect a work refresher due by the 30th. The footer said, "A respectful workplace is everyone's responsibility." The plant reflected in my monitor like a shadow with leaves. By 2:15, the office finished eating and came back with the high of salt and sugar, with stories about a dessert that had a flame and a bill that someone else paid. Amber stopped at my desk, her perfume arranged in expensive syllables. "Dan said finance needs the raw attrition tables," she said, performing novelty on a fact already old. "Could you send them by EOD?" "I can," I said. I did not add, "You could too." Power asks for things it already has to remind you who carries the asking. And Amber's smile sharpened. About Friday's town hall. "We're doing a quick highlight reel of our values work. Dan will shout out the logistics deck. It's a team win, team win." The phrase slid over me like a blazer in the wrong size. "You can wear it." "But it never stops pinching." "Of course," I said. After she left, I opened the raw tables, confirmed their integrity, zipped the folder, and named it Grace Santos Q3 Attrition Raw, Validated, 24/09/15 zip. Dates are little anchors against the tide. ICC Finance, HR Operations. I CC'd myself. I attached the deck too in PDF, the watermark quiet in the corner like a witness with a good memory. At 3:03, the plant dropped a leaf. It detached at the stem with the softest sound, a complaint smaller than breath, and fell onto the desk like a note slipped under a door. Something is not right. I picked it up delicately. The underside was pale, almost tender. I laid it on a sticky note and wrote 303 dropped. I don't know why. Maybe because keeping record is how you stay real when people are practicing amnesia around you. By 4:59, Dan pinged me a thumbs-up emoji. Finance replied, "Thanks," with no punctuation, which is the corporate way of keeping your thank yous on a leash. My shoulders felt like I had worn them all day. The plant leaned toward the window, toward a light that arrived like a rumor and stayed like a fact. At 5:17, I shut down the computer and slipped the leaf into the notebook I kept in my bag. A long, narrow book with a fabric spine and a ribbon like a vein. On the first page I had written months ago, "If you take credit, carry the questions too." I don't know if it's a rule or a prayer. The elevator was empty. In the steel reflection, I looked like a woman I almost recognized. 51, hair pinned back with a clip that had lost a tooth, lipstick worn at the center. The plant, in its small white pot, fit in the crook of my arm like a harmless secret. I carried it home that night, because there are things you don't leave alone in rooms that are learning how to forget you. On the street, the air smelled like rain that wouldn't commit. I held the plant close and told it the truth out loud, because honesty, like water, is better measured than withheld. "We're going to be fine," I said, and then quietly, almost like a dare, "We're going to outlive their politics." The city blinked. A bus exhaled. Someone laughed into a phone and said, "No, listen," as if listening were a door you could hold open with your foot. I crossed on the walk signal, the pot warm from my hands, the vine trembling just enough to look like courage. That night, At 7:45, I wrote 3 lines in my notebook. They called it internal. He used my words. The plant lost a leaf at 3:03. I did not. I slipped the leaf between pages 2 and 3 and pressed the book closed. When I turned off the lamp, the apartment was briefly full of the sound of the city arguing with itself. In the dark, I felt the shape of the story arranging itself, not as revenge yet, but as roots. Some things don't grow faster when you talk to them. They grow when you refuse to die. By Thursday, the silence had texture. It wasn't empty anymore. It was crowded, filled with the sound of people not saying my name. At 8:11 a.m., I poured coffee in the break room. Behind me, 2 analysts whispered about the team deck that had killed it in Monday's meeting. "Dan's so sharp," one said. "Amber too. They're like unstoppable together." The second one laughed. "Yeah, the power duo." No one turned when I set down my mug. The sound of porcelain on countertop was louder than their entire conversation. I wanted to correct them. I wanted to say those were my numbers, my models, my sleepless nights. But correction feels like begging when you're the only one who remembers the truth. So instead, I rinsed my cup, dried it, and walked back to my desk like the ghost of someone still on payroll. At 9, Amber sent a company-wide email. Subject, Team Recognition. So proud of our logistics group for their amazing presentation this week. Big thanks to Dan for leading the charge and setting the standard for collaboration. There it was, the digital equivalent of applause you can't clap for yourself. I hovered over the Reply All button just long enough to feel the weight of it. Then closed the window. At 10:27, a new plant appeared on Amber's desk, glossy, tall, pre-watered, still in a congratulations wrapper. A gift from upper management. The irony was photosynthetic. At noon, Lucia passed my cubicle with her salad. "They really didn't mention you?" she whispered. I smiled the way people do when they're pretending not to bleed. "It's fine," I said. "The work speaks for itself," she hesitated. "Sometimes it whispers." When she left, I looked at my own plant, its stem still thin, its newest leaf small but stubbornly green. I turned the pot toward the window. The leaf leaned, hungry for something honest. By Friday, small cruelties had become routine. People stopped CCing me. Invites disappeared from my calendar. A junior associate accidentally took my seat in the weekly stand-up and laughed. "Oh, didn't realize you were still joining these." Still joining, as if presence required permission. At 3:46 p.m., Amber called out from across the floor. "Grace! Could you check the turnover reports for Q2? Dan says some of the formulas broke." "Sure," I said, and opened the file I had built, line by line, 6 months ago. They hadn't broken. They had been overwritten by someone who didn't understand relative references. A small, stupid mistake. But it was mine to fix now, apparently. By 5:12, the corrections were done. I didn't say anything, just sent it back, quiet as a delivered truth. At 5:14, Amber replied with a thumbs-up emoji. "No, thank you. No words. Just a tiny, yellow symbol of hierarchy." That weekend, I didn't touch my work laptop. I repotted the plant. Fresh soil, a wider container. I cut the brown tips, rinsed the leaves, whispered something small and almost kind. When I watered it, the sound reminded me of typing. Constant, steady, necessary. I thought of how they'd look at me on Monday, and how I'd look right back. There's a power in being underestimated. It gives you time to prepare while they celebrate too soon. Monday arrived with rain, and a new round of performance. Optimization rumors. The office buzzed like a hive with bad. Wi-Fi Amber's voice carried across the floor. "We might have to restructure the HR division soon. Efficiency, you know?" Everyone nodded like worshippers. I looked at my plant. 2 new leaves had opened over the weekend, pale but alive. I whispered to it, just loud enough for myself. "Survive quietly." It confuses them. At 2:02 that day, HR forwarded me the preliminary review schedule. Amber's name was on the panel. Dan's too. My slot was Tuesday, 9:15 a.m. That's when I realized they were building a case. The missed invites, the overwritten files, the subtle exclusion. It wasn't random. It was preparation. They were lining up a story, and in their version, I was already the problem. But stories can be rewritten, especially by the person who still keeps every receipt. At 7:03 that night, I stayed behind as the floor emptied. The motion lights dimmed, one square at a time. In the half-dark, the plant glowed faintly in its pot, like something remembering sunlight. I opened my notebook, the one with the ribbon vein, and wrote, "Emails missing CC since 10:07 Amber's team recognition. Post. Timestamp 9 a.m. 10:10 Dan's overwritten formulas. Metadata confirmed. 10:11 15:43 performance review scheduled 10:15 9:15 a.m. Then, under it, a single line in bigger letters. Silence has a pattern. Patterns have proof." I closed the notebook, looked at the plant, and whispered, "We're not dying here." The building hummed around me. Printers, air vents, ambition. All of it pretending to be progress. I turned off the light, left the plant by the window, and smiled for the first time that week. Because I finally understood something. You don't need to shout to be heard. You just have to last longer than the noise. Tuesday, 9 to 12 a.m. The conference room smelled like toner and nerves. The blinds were half closed, letting in stripes of light that cut across the table like question marks. Amber sat at the head of the table, arms folded neatly. Dan to her left, HR rep to her right. The same HR I had once trained when she was an intern. "Morning." "Grace," Amber said, the way people greet a student they've already graded. "Morning," I replied. My plant wasn't there, but I felt it anyway, its small, steady patience somewhere in me. The HR rep began, "This is just a routine performance review." "Grace, nothing formal, the phrase that always comes before something permanent." Amber smiled. "Professional and precise. We've noticed some misalignments lately. Communication gaps. Missed syncs. The team feels like some information hasn't been flowing smoothly." Dan nodded, eyes on his notebook. He didn't look up. I knew what they were doing. They were laying bricks for a story where I was the bottleneck. The outdated gear in a young machine? Could you be more specific? I asked evenly. Amber hesitated. The hesitation of someone rehearsing. Emails not copied, project delays, some resistance to new structures, meaning, "You didn't bow fast enough when we rearranged the throne room," the HR rep added. "Of course, this isn't disciplinary. We just want alignment." They said that word again, alignment. The corporate synonym for obedience. I looked at Dan. He shifted in his chair. "We value your experience, Grace. We just need consistency. Consistency." I almost smiled. "I understand," I said. "Would you like me to document my communications this quarter?" Amber blinked, caught slightly off rhythm. "That's not necessary." "Maybe it is," I said, calm as still water. "Documentation helps with alignment." For the first time that morning, the silence didn't belong to them. After the meeting, I walked back through the open floor, that modern battlefield where the only armor is a calm face. Someone glanced up, then looked away. Someone laughed too loud. The plant on Amber's desk, the big glossy one in its gift wrapper, had started to wilt at the edges. At my desk, my own plant had lost another leaf. I picked it up, wrote 9:57, dropped during review, and pressed it flat inside my notebook. Lucia appeared beside me, hesitant. "How did it go?" I gave a small shrug. "They want alignment." Her eyes softened. "You okay?" "I'm not sure yet," I said. "But I think they made a mistake." That night I didn't cry. I made tea, opened my notebook, and reread my notes. Each line of time, each file name, each CC proof doesn't need anger. Just patience. The city outside my window glittered like opportunity sold by the hour. I turned off the light, let the dark settle, and said to no one, "Tomorrow, We start watering differently. Wednesday, 6:28 a.m., the office was still. The air smelled like overnight cleaning spray and unkept promises. I arrived early, before Amber, before Dan, before anyone had a chance to control the story. The plant on my desk looked half asleep, but a new bud had begun to uncurl, small and brave. Good timing, I whispered. Then I opened the HR system. Grace Santos had access no one remembered she still had. Archived training logs, time-stamped approvals, project audit trails. All the data they used came through systems I once built. I could see who edited what, who changed numbers, who claimed authorship, and there it was. Metadata proving Dan's login had overwritten the Q2 reports at 15:43, the same mistake he blamed on me. I screenshotted, exported, printed. Quiet, methodical, almost tender. Each click felt like a heartbeat coming back. By 9:05, Amber swept in, loud perfume first. "Morning. We're doing coffee with ops. Can you join at 10? "Of course," I said. I didn't tell her I had just documented her own missed deadlines. 4 emails ignored by finance, 2 follow-ups marked "read" with no reply. I attended the coffee chat. I smiled when she spoke. I took notes. When she bragged about our HR precision, I underlined the word precision. At 2 p.m., while the office hummed with spreadsheets and polite gossip, I sent an email to HR's compliance inbox. Subject: Documentation for audit readiness. Please find attached metadata logs, training completion status, and data ownership verification for Q2, Q3 reports. Grace Santos, no accusations. No explanations. Just the truth archived politely. At 2:03, I copied it to my personal email. At 2:05, I printed one hard copy and slipped it into the back of my notebook. By evening, I noticed the plant had lifted slightly toward the light, as if aware of balance returning. I touched one leaf. It felt steady, alive. I whispered, "They think silence means surrender, but silence can also mean preparation." The next morning, Amber called for a quick sync. Her tone was too bright. "Grace, just making sure we're all set for next week's town hall. The one Dan will host?" "Yes," I said. "I've already pre-submitted the compliance data." She froze mid-sentence. "You did what?" "Routine check. It's standard before town halls, isn't it?" Amber blinked. For once, no words. The silence between us was clean, sharp, exact. That night, as rain needled the city glass, I opened my notebook again. I added a new line, 1016, documentation filed, system proof secure. Amber's tone changed. Then, below it, plants don't fight the storm. They collect the rain. I placed my pen down and smiled. Some victories don't sound like anything at all. The email came at 8:42 on a Monday. Subject: Internal audit, preliminary review, no warning. No context. Just that single sentence. Your department's project logs have been selected for standard review. People froze mid-scroll across the floor. No one ever said it, but internal audit meant something else in this company. It meant someone whispered your name. Amber's heels clicked faster that morning. She stopped at my desk with the calm of someone performing calm. "Grace, you saw the email?" Her voice was tight around the edges. "Yes. They said it's random." "It usually isn't," I said softly. She blinked. Maybe she'd forgotten that I helped write the first version of the compliance policy. Back when random actually meant random, by 10:07, 2 auditors appeared on the 17th floor. Strangers with clipboards and deliberate smiles. They moved like chess pieces, pausing at desks, asking for copies, timelines, chain of custody notes. Each time they said just routine, people nodded too quickly. At 10:31, one of them stopped at my cubicle. "Ms. Santos? We need access to the Q2 logistics analysis. You're listed as originator." "Of course." I opened the shared drive, the same one I'd watched Amber and Dan edit weeks ago. Audit logs don't lie. They whisper timestamps like prayers. The auditor squinted at the metadata. So, you created it and Dan Harris modified? Yes, at 3:43 p.m. on June 11th. He wrote it down carefully, the way truth gets recorded when no one expects it to show up. By noon, the floor was a whisper factory. People who had ignored me for weeks now asked if I wanted coffee. Lucia slid by my cubicle with her lunch in hand. "They're talking," she murmured. "Apparently, finance found inconsistencies." "Inconsistencies?" I said. "That's generous." She hesitated. "You okay?" "I'm watching," I said. "Plants don't panic when it rains." At 1:46, HR called for Dan and Amber. The conference room blinds snapped shut. Always a bad sign. The sound of that click felt louder than any confrontation could. I stayed at my desk, hands still, face neutral. The plant beside me looked healthier than it had in months. Leaves dark, upright, no brown edges. When light passed through the glass, it left small green reflections on my keyboard like proof of life. At 3:12, Dan walked past. His shirt was wrinkled now. He didn't look at me. Amber followed, smiling too much. The brittle kind of smile that comes from realizing you've been observed. By 4:47, HR sent an all-staff email. Subject: Temporary review of data attribution. Confidential. All affected personnel will be contacted individually. People pretended to read it slowly. Everyone already knew, Lucia mouthed across the aisle. "They're cooked." I didn't reply. I opened my notebook and wrote, "Audit, June 11th, modification confirmed. Amber plus, Dan called in." No denial, no defense. Silence. Confession. When written in numbers. Then I closed the book and turned toward the window. Outside, the glass towers across the street reflected the afternoon sun back into our floor. For a moment, the light hit my plant just right, every leaf shining, every vein visible. It looked like something that had finally learned not just to survive, but to stay luminous in the middle of scrutiny. Friday arrived quietly. No announcements, no emails. Just absence. Dan's desk was empty by 8:10. Amber's office door was closed. Her nameplate gone by noon. Corporate amnesia works fast. At 1:37, a company-wide memo landed. Subject: Team realignment and acknowledgements. As part of our renewed focus on transparency and accountability, we'd like to recognize Grace Santos for her contributions to data integrity and audit readiness. Her attention to process exemplifies our values. The word recognize glowed on my screen longer than it should have. It was almost funny. The same people who erased me now typing my name as proof they valued honesty. I didn't smile. I just whispered, "Took you long enough." In the break room, people congratulated me the way you congratulate someone who outlived a rumor. "You must feel vindicated," one said. "You showed them," said another. I nodded, but didn't answer. Vindication isn't loud. It's a pulse you feel under the skin when the world finally stops gaslighting you. By the next week, the director called me in. "Grace," he said, "we're launching a new initiative, Respecta Work. We'd like you to lead it." I blinked. "Why me?" He smiled, awkward, like he already knew the answer. "Because you understand what happens when respect is missing." I looked at him for a long moment. That's true. The days that followed were strangely calm. Meetings started on time. People copied my name again. In the kitchen, someone had replaced the old values poster, now printed fresh, same woman, same coffee cup. But this time her smile looked less forced. I passed Amber's old desk one evening. A new employee had taken her spot. Young, nervous, kind eyes. She looked up as I walked by. "You're Grace, right? The audit person?" "Yes. You're kind of a legend here." I laughed softly. Legends are just people with longer memories. At my desk, the plant had 7 new leaves. The smallest one, curled at the center, had begun to split open. Slow, deliberate, unstoppable. When I watered it, the sound felt like punctuation. The office lights dimmed to evening gold, and the reflections of the leaves shimmered across the monitor like green handwriting. Lucia passed by and stopped. "You kept it alive," she said. Smiling, "It kept me alive," I replied. She laughed, then lowered her voice. "They're lucky you stayed." "Maybe," I said. Or maybe staying was the quietest way to win. That Friday, during the town hall, my name appeared on the screen again. Employee Spotlight Grace Santos, Integrity in Action. The applause was polite, but the look on people's faces said something else. Relief, maybe. That fairness still existed somewhere. When I stepped down from the podium, Lucia handed me a small box. Inside, a new plant. "For the next desk," she said. "Maybe this one won't need rescuing," I smiled. They all do eventually. That night, the building emptied one fluorescent row at a time. I stood by the window, my reflection half in shadow, half in light. The plant on my desk glowed faintly, 7 leaves open, one still unfolding, proof that endurance can look beautiful too. I took a deep breath and whispered, "We didn't shout. We didn't crumble. We just outlasted." Outside, the city exhaled, traffic hum, soft rain, the rhythm of survival. Inside, everything was still, except the leaves that kept moving toward the light. It was a Wednesday afternoon. Gray sky, air thick with that kind of stillness that comes after a storm, but before the air remembers how to move again. Most people had already left for lunch. I was finishing an HR summary for the new program when I heard her voice. "Grace?" Amber stood by the door. No perfume this time. No clipboard. Just a small notebook clutched like a shield. She looked smaller. Not in height, but in presence. Like a light that had learned its limit. "Can we talk?" I nodded. "Of course." She hesitated, then stepped inside. The door closed with a soft sigh. For a moment, she just looked at my desk. The plant sat there, lush now, 7 leaves wide, one tiny green curl emerging. Its color was a kind of defiance, quiet but undeniable. Amber smiled faintly. "It's still alive." "Yes," I said. "Some things outlast the neglect." She didn't answer. Her fingers fidgeted with the notebook's edge. Then she spoke, voice low. I wanted to say, "I'm sorry. For everything. The audit, the meeting, all of it. I shouldn't have handled things that way." Her words hung between us, fragile and heavy. I let a moment pass before replying. "You didn't handle things, Amber. You curated them." She flinched slightly. "I know. I thought I was doing what leadership expected." "That's how systems survive," I said quietly. "Not because people believe in them. Because people are afraid to question them." She sank into the chair opposite me. "You must hate me." "I don't," I said. "I just finally stopped expecting decency from convenience." Amber nodded slowly, eyes glistening just enough to make her look human again. "I heard Dan's been transferred." "Compliance external branch." "I heard too," I said. "Far enough away to start over, close enough to remember why." A small silence settled. Then she whispered, "You must feel vindicated." I shook my head. "No, I just feel visible again." "That's different." She looked down, closed her notebook, and stood. "You're a better person than me." I smiled softly. "No, just an older one." She gave a short, shaky laugh, the kind that sounds like it might turn into tears if left alone too long. Then she said, "Good luck with respect to work. They couldn't have picked anyone better." "Thank you," I said. "I'll start by defining what the word actually means." Amber nodded, turned toward the door, and paused. "Grace?" "Yes, you were right. Silence does have a sound. I can hear it now." Then she left. Her reflection passed across the glass wall, fading, shrinking, gone. When she was gone, I sat still for a long time. The office clock ticked faintly behind me. Steady as breathing. Outside, the rain had begun again, light and rhythmic against the windows. I reached out, touched the plant. The newest leaf had finally opened. Perfect, whole, no scars. For the first time in months, I let myself smile, not at victory, but at survival. They were never the same thing. That evening, I packed up slowly. The city lights outside blinked alive one by one, small constellations of other people's deadlines. I picked up the plant, the same way I had years ago when it was just 2 pale leaves in a chipped pot. Now it felt heavier, rooted. In the elevator, I caught my reflection in the mirrored wall. A woman holding something green and alive, walking out of a place that once tried to make her invisible. It felt enough. At home, I placed the plant on the kitchen counter. Beside the kettle, the air smelled like rain and rosemary. I brewed tea, opened my old notebook, the one that started this whole quiet rebellion, and flipped to the back page. There I wrote, "We didn't outsmart them. We outlasted them. Fairness isn't loud. It's consistent. Justice, when done right, feels like breathing again." Then I closed the notebook. Slowly. The paper still held warmth from my hand, like proof that I existed, and still do. The next morning, I woke to sunlight spilling across the windowsill. The plant looked radiant, almost proud. One new bud had emerged overnight, fragile, but sure of itself. I touched its leaf gently. "You made it," I whispered. We both did, and for the first time in years, I didn't rush my coffee. I let the world move at my pace. Sometimes revenge isn't fire. It's persistence. Sometimes it doesn't end with applause, just with peace. And sometimes, what grows back after neglect isn't bitterness, but proof that fairness, like a plant in poor light, still finds a way to live. If you've ever faced something like this, tell me your story in the comments. I read everyone, because fairness doesn't shout, it stays, like the video. And subscribe to Office Revenge Files for more stories where women turn silence into power.